personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a special guest on the show, Abimbola Adegbite.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I try very hard. And so I'm really happy to have you on the show. We had the pleasure of meeting. We were on a panel together. We did a panel with Citrix Corporation. I thought it was really cool what they did. So, this is more about kind of cybersecurity and stuff like that. And then they obviously wanted to kind of throw me in the mix with privacy. So it was really cool. So we sort of broached both of those subjects. But I really enjoyed being on the panel with you, and I thought you had really great insights. And so you are with your application security for the app, Jane.app, right?
Yeah, Jane.
So tell me a bit about your kind of journey into like technology and what you do at Jane.
Okay. Thank you very much, Debbie. I don't think we've really spoken this year, but again, you can call me Abby for short. To answer your question, my journey into IT was a really colorful one. Fun fact, I'm self-taught. Everything I know about IT today, I self-learned. I studied mass communication, and my actual journey, my foray into IT started in 2011. I used to be a cameraman. I used to work in front of cameras as a presenter. I also managed a hotel as a night duty manager. And then between 2010 and 2011, I was at this crossroads because in my country of birth, there's a compulsory youth service that you have to go through once you graduate from a higher institution. So it was at that point an opportunity came up to learn about Oracle EBS, e-business suites. And I took the journey down southeast Nigeria to a state called Bayelsa. And then it was at that point that I can pinpoint and say I started my journey into IT. Fast forward to 2014, I started out as a QA. I also self-learned, and then I grew in that position to testing lead. And it was at that point, I'm really appreciative of my manager during that period, because he made sure that I was exposed to everything and anything that had to do with testing, security testing, performance testing, API testing, you name it. I was doing it all. And I moved to Canada in 2018, and the opportunity came in form of a contract role at IBM. And ever since then, I've not looked back within application security. And to the B part of your question, what do I do at Jane? My current role involves working with development and product managers to prioritize security stories and requirements. This is done in order to balance security and business risk, as well as privacy as well, because you can't do one without the other these days. And we do all of this, or I help to do all of this to deliver the most impactful improvements within the software development lifecycle. And I use something that I like, application security OKRs, objectives and key results. That way, the goal is there for everyone to see. And the various value stream teams that we partner with, the product managers, the development teams, can key into that during their planning.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's really cool. I think, you have such a important job. I don't think we've had anyone on the show yet who's done application security for apps. So I think, being someone who has to, not just kind of a regular network infrastructure, you're kind of at the forefront because like all your consumers are, they're you have client facing or outward facing customers. So, security is very top of mind. You want to attract people to your, application. And then I like the way that you have put together, saying how you use the objectives to make sure that the teams understand cybersecurity and what you're doing.
Yeah.
Tell me about, this is something I love to talk to cyber people about is how do you get people within the organization to understand what their role is? Like why is cyber important and what their role is in it? Because I feel like you hear in trainings and things, about cybersecurity, people tell people, well, it's sort of everyone's job in some way, but that is so vague. So to me, if you say it was everyone's job, it's like no one's job.
Correct. I agree.
What are your thoughts?
The, I'm glad to be the trailblazing application security person that you have on your podcast. So yay. That being said, making everyone aware of their roles, their various roles in security is something that I do often. And the way I approach it is as a salesperson. Sales can be really annoying sometimes and frustrating when you don't get your desired goals. So one of the way I've been able to reorientate myself is to say to myself that I'm selling security. It's a really fine art balancing security and customer delight, which is user experience. You have people who, the general notion is security is everyone's business. Yes, that's correct. However, you need to make people constantly aware. You need to keep telling them, oh, this is the role that we need you to play. This is how you need to play that role. Just like a playbook, right? But think about a playbook where you do the fire drill exercises every day and constantly reminding developers of their role within the software development lifecycle with regards to security, product managers, product owners within the software development lifecycle as people who would be responsible for helping to come up with security requirements and security stories, but with the perspective of the customer. Most of the time, our customers are, for people within application security, our customers are internal facing, but at the same time, we have to do that with the mindset of the end user, right? Internal facing developers, the C-level executives, which I'll touch on a bit, the product managers, infrastructure guys, because it's with application security, you are at a unique intersection, right? You interface with privacy, NetSec, CloudSec, InfraSec, you can have a secure application, but if the platform that would host the application is not secure, that becomes null and void, right? So for the C-level executives, you need to be able to constantly bring to their consciousness visibility regarding the metrics of how you've been able to push your security initiative within the organization. And I'm sure that for anyone within application security, you would have been frustrated about the fact that you have to explain what is already objective, what is already a fact, but it's the role that you carry, is the responsibility that you have to do every day. For example, there was an initiative to deprecate something, a particular feature of an application that had been deprecated, and took a bit of convincing, right? To say, oh, these are the 5 Ws, and how would we, oh, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? When are we doing it? Where, and then how are we going to do it? Those were the questions that I had to answer and put forward to everyone. I even had to work together with a colleague of mine to come up with what's it called, like a cartoon image, so as to sell that security initiative within the organization. And it worked to positive, it had a positive effect on everyone at the end of the day. So, which was a win in my book. And I will continue to apply that approach going forward.
Very cool. Well, so what is happening in the world today in, cyber technology, privacy even, that concerns you most right now?
So, most of the time, it's the various ways of doing old tricks, right? Pouring in new wine into an old keg, you'd see various types of security vulnerabilities that had once existed or that once trended in the past. And you'll be wondering, oh, how did they do that? How did they come up with that? The answer is simple. While you are focused on securing your perimeter, securing your application as a whole, these malicious individuals, they have the time to work with, and that's what you don't have to your advantage, right? So they're constantly reworking, retrofitting malware, and just coming up with simple, easy ways to do things that were once thought to require a lot of skill. Another worrying trend, well, not so much, not so much worrying, but it's a big headache these days, is a malware as a service, right? Where anyone can pay a token and say, "Oh, this is what I want to do." More recently, ransomware as a service, not just malware as a service, ransomware as a service. People are empowered just with a token to bring down organizations to their knees. Another one that is concerning is there's no real regulation regarding ransomware payment. And it's really concerning because organizations are getting to that point where they're alone. I mean, you wonder how do we get to a point where we are able to say this is the standard rule, this is what we need to do. You look out there and you see, oh, this is what to do when you're struck by a ransomware. But every organization have unique they have certain uniqueness that come with their operations, and it becomes really frustrating, for a lack of a better word, to not know what to do when such events do occur. So, state actors, they're really concerning as well, because you don't know when you're caught in the crossfire of that kind of situation. So, I mean, so far, those are the ones that are really trending up in terms of application security as a whole.
And how do you find, just like you said, is that the landscape is a lot more complicated. And I think, you know,
Indeed.
I I am frustrated sometimes in the media. I feel like cybersecurity may need like a PR campaign or something because in the media, first of all, the word hacker is always a criminal in their mind, which is not the truth, right?
That's not true.
Also, they have this thing about they always do those pictures with the guy in the basement and with a hoodie who's doing stuff. And it's like, and even, I've even heard people at programs talk about like insider threats. And they always talk about it like it's like, some, rogue employee or whatever. And we know that, an insider threat doesn't necessarily have to be nefarious, right? It could
Yes,
just be sort of a gap that people are looking at or a
correct.
way that someone's doing something that sort of creates a problem for organizations. Also, I think one other unique thing that you have that I would love for you to talk about is kind of the cloud. So,
Hmm.
some organizations, over the years, it's been pretty funny. So, some organizations they're like, okay, we're not going to ever go into the cloud because we're that's going to make us less secure or something. And so, I don't think I think the cloud is all about how you secure your data
Yes.
in a
Yeah.
lot of ways and
Hmm.
how you leverage that. So I think the problem that people have when they think about the cloud, who aren't accustomed to it or don't know anything about it, is that, they have a responsibility. So throwing stuff in the cloud doesn't relinquish your responsibility
Yes.
to protect data, and it's different. It's different than what you have to deal with just data is on premise. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. I mean, the cloud providers are very specific about the responsibility of the customers using their service. And they say the security of the data that you put there is your responsibility. Their role is to secure the cloud. And something really important that you mentioned is clarifying the notion that is a hacker does not necessarily translate, or hacking in itself does not translate into a malicious activity. We all hack. I mean, if you can take something, if you can do DIY, that's in itself is hacking, right? I think the appropriate word to use is a malicious actor, malicious threat actor. I know it's a mouthful, uh, so people just resort to saying the bad guys. So there are multiple layers to the questions, to the question that you posed. So I'm going to take it one at a time. So, in I think not taking advantage of what the benefits that the cloud provides far outweighs you staying on prem. Because, say, for example, and God forbid, there was a natural disaster and you needed to go to your data center to start up the service. Imagine the craziness wading through. Last week there was a snow blizzard here in Toronto, and I could imagine at that point people who had to go out to work. So imagine that kind of situation where you could not drive. It was practically impossible to drive at that point. So being on the cloud will save you as a company, will save your resources, the time spent commuting. The, the the advantages are numerous, right? And there's always a constant need to review your configuration when you do indeed take on using the cloud services. The bane of it, like you mentioned, insider threat, not necessarily someone who is shipping your data out. It's just that oversight in your configuration, that oversight in your setup. One simple setting. I, for most part, I realize that organizations that take on those kind of services want to want to replicate what they do on a day-to-day basis, which is not a bad thing, right? But in doing that without adequate review of the processes, you start to automate inefficiencies. And it's those inefficiencies that causes those gaps that leads to a bigger insider threat challenge. Another layer to it, is being able to deliver what's it called cutting edge updates to your users, taking advantage of cloud benefits. You're able to deploy quickly, and if there was an issue, you're able to quickly revert or fix that rather than waiting for a long period of time. So these days, it's good to have like a backup. So companies usually would do like a hybrid arrangement where you have on cloud and then part on prem, and then managing that is also in itself managing the bridge between cloud and on prem is also in itself somewhat challenging. So it's pretty interesting. There's so many benefits, and I can go on and on about it. So
And when you're using an app, you're in the cloud regardless, right? So you can't not be in the cloud.
yeah, these days, I mean,
uh,
the bigger
yeah,
problem will be running out of internet rather than the cloud.
right, exactly. Absolutely, absolutely. So tell me about, this interplay of like privacy and cybersecurity. So,
Mm,
Um, you know, I think because the privacy regulations have tightened up, over
Hmm.
the years, it's become more and more in the forefront in terms
Yeah.
of an issue. Probably wasn't, maybe many years ago, but we're definitely seeing this. But tell me how you like interplay with kind of the privacy requirements that happen in your organization.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I think the foundational component that is security awareness and compliance, because it's one thing to have all the privacy rules, and then for what is what, you're you're not playing your part in ensuring that compliance is attained. There are various privacy rules out there that are thrown around. Of course, the biggest one that we know is HIPAA. In Canada, there's the Piper Act. I think that's getting renamed now to the Canadian Privacy Act. But all in all, the role of application security is to, as much as possible, ensure that you your data privacy and compliance team is partnered with in ensuring that awareness is built on correct assumption and not just telling employees, oh, you need to ensure that you are compliant, or your developers, and ensuring that you automate compliance as much as possible. Because once you do it, if you do it once, or if you're able to achieve it once, then you would only you would only be fine tuning and making it even efficient in the long run, rather than going back every year. And which reminds me of a point. So whenever it's time to do like audits, I've been in situations where in the past no one cares about compliance or audit for 11 months of the year. And then when it's compliance month, everyone is running around scampering. Oh, we didn't have this. Do you have this? Do you have this report? So in that kind of regard to application security and privacy, I believe strongly in compliance as code in that situation. There, no one is running foul or in violation of what you need to comply with. And the B part of that is employee training, employee awareness, and also communicating with your customers, your end users, and letting them know that, oh, this is a new thing that we're doing, or this is something that has been existing, but we're taking it serious now, which is some organizations are doing it really well, but some not so much. It's like, oh, we need to hide this and hide that. And it goes back to your point where when you mentioned application security or cybersecurity as a whole needs some form of PR or rebranding, I would say that within the security team, whether you're doing AppSec, NetSec, or InfraSec, it has become imperative to have someone who specializes in communication, because communicating with the client, as much as it might be painful revealing certain truths that you're not comfortable with, it has its benefits, because at that point you're disclosing and you're letting them know, oh, maybe we're not doing this really well, but we've decided that this is the path to follow, and we've chosen to do it well. And you would see that customers gravitate more to that type of situation. Having applications letting you know, oh, before we had an oversight at this point, but right now we are taking it serious because of your privacy. You start to know, oh, they really care about me. And I put myself in such customer shoes, and well thought out. A well thought out communication strategy is one of those things that is required with regards to privacy and application security, because yes, you are selling a product, but the passion for the people is what drives you in designing that product, or should be what drives you in designing that product in the first place. And when you talk about privacy, you think about people and their rights to data that they have or own. So I think that's my own take about it, really.
Right. I like to tell companies that, And as simple as the statement is, I still get people who are shocked when I say this. It's like, when you collect data of individuals, it doesn't belong to you. It
Yeah.
belongs to the individual, and you're like a steward of that data. And you're like, what? Like, I thought it belongs to me because I have it in my
Mhm.
possession. It's like, no, it's not yours. So, if you borrow something from a friend, you probably take care of it differently than if it was your own thing, right? Because
Correct.
you have a responsibility to that other person. So if you think about data or think about privacy in that way, it'll sort of help change your perspective or everything.
Yeah.
Also, it's something you mentioned, I want to talk a bit about when we're talking about like privacy and compliance. Some companies feel like, okay, we have a data privacy officer, we have these policies and procedures in place, but then they can't really translate that to kind of operations
Yes.
basically. And
Yeah.
so I tell companies, even if they have policies, I review them. I'm like, do you actually do this? Do you delete your data every 60 days or so
Right.
what? And then they're like, no. I'm like, don't say that. Your policy should mirror your what you actually do in the business. So
Yeah.
you'll be in a bad position, right? With regulators, with people, if you say, okay, we do these 10 things, and then
What you
you
don't.
look at the operation and you can't prove that you've done any of those things.
Yeah.
And that's problematic. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Again, I cast my mind back to when I said organizations don't care about 11 months of the year, and then when it starts 1 month to start to be proper in front of the regulators, and everyone starts to remember, oh, did we do this? Do we have a report for when we did HIPAA training or that training, or where's our data retention policy? Oh, we're supposed to delete every 7 months or so, depending on what must have been written in the policy. And I feel like, I strongly believe that your policies should reflect your values as a company. If you're unable to do it, and like you mentioned, operationalize your standards, policies, and guidelines, I I believe that that's where resources should be concentrated towards. There's no point taking those policies and standards are not useful if you present it to the C-level executives and they put their stamp of approval on it, but there's no follow-up, or there's no visibility into the implementation of such policies or the usage of such policies. Then something needs to change, right? Either you find a way to automate it, either you find a way to operationalize the usage of those activities, or you find someone, or you even contract it out, right? Or you find a tool that can help you do that, because more organizations are getting into unnecessary risk and trouble dating or copying. Most of the time, templates are used, and then they change the verbiage, adapt it to suit what their current situation is. But after that, no one goes back to look at it. An interesting one is like a business continuity plan, where you have a business continuity plan, but you've never done a fire drill. You've never, you've never gone,
Right.
you've never, you've never gone through any of that, and you were wondering, okay, so what do we do when we get into trouble? It's the same thing with privacy, where another trend I realized these days, towards data privacy and compliance, is the legal team of the organization are usually blind to certain policies that have far-reaching effect on the day-to-day activities of the organization. So it's a big it's a big situation that needs resolution immediately, right? All the forms of security needs to come together, they need to start working together in conjunction with legal, because you can't put out what is called a policy or a standard. You are going to be held liable for such situations. So legal team also needs to start to play a part, or maybe uh, depends on the organization, but maybe it's a situation where AppSec, CloudSec, NetSec, data privacy and compliance needs to now bring or call the attention of the legal team within the organization. And if any organization don't have a legal team per se, they can outsource that responsibility and bring in a consultant who would come in from time to time. But it's really important to not just copy or adapt a template. It's also important to ensure that the company values are reflected in those policies and guidelines as stated.
Yeah, I agree with that. Wow. These are really deep thoughts here. I love what you say about having these teams work together. So the way that it was before can't be like this now,
No.
right? With privacy and security, it can't be like Santa's workshop where everybody does their little part and they don't know what
No.
the other thing is doing, and then magically everything comes together at the end. That just doesn't work, right?
Not anymore.
So being able to have that open channel of communication back and forth, it's funny because a lot of times I'll talk to the legal folks and they'll tell me, oh, this is what we're doing, whatever. And then I talk to the app security or the cyber people, the data people, I say, and I ask them, and it's totally different. So I'm like, hey, they say, oh yeah, we're doing this, and I ask,
Yeah.
are we doing this? And like, no, it's like we have to like get that story together. Like it
Yeah,
can't be, it can't be aspirational. So your policy should be operational, not aspirational. So you
for
shouldn't
sure.
like get, okay, we're going to do these lofty things. Like if you're not actually doing them, you definitely need to, have
Yeah.
that correct. But I love the point that you make about having someone do something in an area that has kind of far reaching impact.
Mhm.
And so you can't know that if you aren't collaborating with these teams,
Yeah.
right? So I'll give you an example. There was a case that came up, and I'll probably talk about it in the future. I have a guest coming on the show to talk about this, but there was a big company, a big financial company in the U.S. that had an issue with kind of data disposal where they had like old servers or some like hard drives with data, and they wanted to the people who were in charge of making sure this stuff got disposed of, they chose a vendor that didn't was not really up to snuff, but this vendor was cheaper than kind of someone else basically,
Right.
right? So they just hurt these companies, they dispose of it of not a good way, and then because those devices had data on it, and that data got in the hands of someone else, so it became like a data breach or whatever. And it's like the part of the organization that was kind of looking at like this task, like hiring this vendor or whatever, they didn't really, for them, they're like, okay, we saved the company $100,000, but having those drives go out and not having them like, destroyed in the way that it should have been cost them like $60 million. So I think your point is well made about understanding, you need more of a strategy. You need someone to kind of look at it at a higher level. It can't just be, I do my part, you do your part or whatever.
Yeah.
It had these, especially as it relates to data of individuals,
Mhm.
these things do and can have kind of far ranging impacts.
Yeah. I like to add though that I realize again, this is my own thought. The challenge that I've seen is many organizations take policies and guidelines like they are plans, right? But they are not. Plans should be treated like a plan. Policies and guidelines and standards should be treated or should be viewed from the point of from the lens of the legal team within the organization. Again, since most of the 85% of the breaches reported thus far involve some form of human error. Throwing more money at the problem by buying the latest cybersecurity tool out there, at its core, it just shows that cybersecurity is not a technical, it's not just a technical problem. It's mostly a human problem. And it has gotten to that point where you cannot be blind to other forms of, to other domains in cybersecurity, and cybersecurity is wide. Talk about risk. And, yeah, fun fact, application security is also a form of risk management. So every day I realize that in selling application security, you have to, or pushing application security initiatives, you have to approach it from a point of view of this is the long game. We have to keep doing this because, again, most of the things related to application security are objectives, they are facts. But in selling that to non technical stakeholders, you need to be able to come up with stories and say, oh, this is the user story, this is the why, this is the need. And privacy really goes hand in hand with application security these days.
I love what you're saying about stories. So this is one reason why I really love talking to people who work at kind of consumer facing organizations. Because you guys are totally top notch and you understand, you're an executive, right? You have to be able to tell a story. You have to be able to talk to people in different
Yeah,
areas of your organization, communicate the value, so it can't be just like, oh, I worked really hard.
yeah,
That's not a good story.
yeah. That's not. I mean, I've come to realize that the hard way. Like I've had hair pulling moments where this is objective. It is what it is. This called it's a sunny day today. But imagine trying to explain it's a sunny day. The sun is out, it's shining, but when dealing with customers who are non-technical or who not necessarily understand the technicalities of what you just mentioned, a story is a good way to communicate the need. And one thing that we do within Jane is first question, why? Why are we doing this? And once you are able to ask yourself that before approaching people, you would know how to present it. Again, communication is also a fine art, so you need to grow in the art of telling stories and then presenting it in a way that is non-refutable. People would always come back with questions, but if you think about those questions ahead of time and you realize that organizations need more than technology, there's a need for employees to be both the first and last line of defense. And in thinking about that and saying, okay, I am the employee here helping to make this product better. But I think of myself as the customer who is using this. What will be the delight in me using this particular feature that's just been rolled out? And once I'm able to answer that question, then I can go ahead and approach the non-technical stakeholders with the value.
Right, right. So if it were the world according to Abimbola and we did everything that you said, what would be your wish for privacy anywhere in the world, whether it be regulation, corporate, the way people work in corporations with privacy, security teams,
Yeah.
anything, technology, people
In,
stuff.
yeah. In my ideal world, I would, this is my opinion, um, you should get paid for companies using your data. I mean, data as a service is how I think about it, where you are using my data, no problem. That data is enriching your pocket. But at the same time, I should get, or customers should get paid for using those kind of services that are cash cow, right? Some form of reward, right? I can't keep going there and behind me, yeah, using cookies to track my life like some form of law enforcement agency. you know, it's really fascinating the things that the internet knows about you, right? Without your knowledge, and it's only recently that all of this is coming to light. So, in view of that, and retrospectively, there needs to be some form of a rewards program. Some companies are doing it one way or the other. Either you're using their application and then you get rewarded for that. But it needs to scale. It needs to be the norm. It needs to be what everyone does, where you take my data, you pay me for it. It might not be monetary. It might be that I get credits for using your service rather than, or I get discounts using your service. I think that would be ideal because right now it's a love-hate relationship, right? You can't do without certain services these days in terms of productivity, in terms of connecting at a social level. But in my ideal world, it would become imperative and it will be the rule that we get rewarded in exchange of the data that we put out there.
Wow, that's a really good answer. Yeah, that's such a hot topic issue, hot button issue, because some people feel like, well, my data shouldn't be sold. It's like a fundamental right for privacy. But I mean, the data is sold,
It
so it's
is,
like the horse has left that barn many, many moons ago,
for
right?
sure.
So I think, there is money being made there, and you're right. There are a lot of cases coming up. That's adding more transparency to kind of that underlayer of the internet of
Yeah.
how the data is, what's collected about people, how it's collected, how it's, monetized. And that whole industry is now coming to light more,
Hmm.
especially as, so one part is the monetization of it. And then the other
Correct.
part, I mean, monetization, of course, but I think the companies that create like risk profiles
Yeah.
based on this data, they're going to have a very uncomfortable time in the future because they don't really want to be transparent about the fact that they
Definitely.
want you to get
Definitely.
denied insurance because you search for chronic illness, two
Yeah.
times a month or something like that,
Yeah.
So
Correct.
yes, it's a very interesting time. And I think, I agree with you that, there should be some way to make it transparent to people what their data is worth and then
Hmm.
let them choose how they want to, if they want to monetize or not.
Correct.
Yeah. So cool, cool.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great to have you on the show. I
Thank you
love
for
to
having
talk to people in Canada. You guys you have such cool heads, so smart about stuff.
me.
And congratulations on your great work at Jane. And I'm sure we'll be able to chat soon.
Yes, well, I might have to reach out to you as well in the coming days. I also volunteer on the board of the Toronto chapter of ISA Square as the director of academic partnerships. So from every month we do have a talk. So I would love to have you on
Oh yeah,
one of
cool.
these days.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah, we definitely have to chat about that. That would be fun.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Thank you. You take care.